coverage of the arrival and capture of SpaceX's Dragon on its 13th resupply mission to the International Space Station. Dragon right now sits 250 meters away from the station, the red and green lights aptly colored for the holiday season, as Dragon is on its way into its final approach with over 4,800 pounds of supplies packed on board. Here inside the room in Mission Control Houston, the Orbit 1 team monitoring systems on board the station and Dragon during its final approach, working in concert with flight controllers out at Hawthorne, who are controlling the Dragon on this final stage as it gets closer and closer to the International Space Station. The team inside the room, again, working with those out at Hawthorne. Here in Houston, they're led right now by Flight Director Vincent LaCourte. And at the Capcom position, we'll hear the voice of Leslie Ringo talking to the crew members of Expedition 54 on board the International Space Station. And again, as Dragon is just 250 meters away, it's getting closer and closer to that capture point. And once it arrives, the two crew members on board standing by, NASA astronauts Mark Vande Hei and Joe Acaba, will be ready to reach out and grab it with the Canadarm2 robotic arm, as they'll wrangle the Dragon and then get it ready to get installed to the International Space Station. So just a couple of steps coming up for the Dragon. Again, it's at this 250-meter point. Pretty soon they'll do a go, no-go for it to enter what's known as the keep-out sphere, an area around the station that just has some additional restrictions governing what spacecraft can and cannot do while they approach the International Space Station. It'll have another hold point at 30 meters, and then it'll arrive there and wait, do an additional series of checkouts just to make sure everything's functioning correctly for the final approach before arriving at the capture point, and that'll be about 10 meters away from the station itself.
Size is approximately the same, but we're showing it port of the outline by probably 2 vehicle widths. And the light, again, is offset from the circle about the same. And the circle is just slightly forward of the corridor center, and all about the same in monitor 3, except we have the vehicle on the outline and just slightly forward.
And Joe, that's a good call.
Getting a status read down from NASA astronaut Joe Acaba. He's backing up Mark Vande Hei, who's going to be the prime for the actual capture. And this is actually a view from a camera inside of the station's cupola, looking at one of the monitors that the astronauts are looking at that they're going to be using for this actual capture operation. And again, they're going to be doing that manually, controlling the arm from on board the International Space Station, reaching out and grappling with the Dragon vehicle. Capture was targeted to come around 5 a.m. Central Time, so a little under an hour and a half from now. Dragon's about 10 minutes down on its timeline right now, but there is room for it to make it up as it continues to close in. Right now, at this moment, it's holding at that 250-meter point, and then very soon we'll get the go to depart that and begin moving in. And again, we'll do the go, no-go for entering into the keep-out sphere, and then Dragon will enter into the immediate vicinity of the International Space Station. It'll have another built-in hold once it's 30 meters away, and then once that's complete and all those checkouts are done, it'll move into the capture point about 10 meters away for the astronauts to reach out with this, the Canadarm2 robotic arm, and grapple with that vehicle. Once they have it, they'll be able to hand over control ultimately to the teams down here in Mission Control, who will then command the robotic arm remotely from the ground to then maneuver Dragon to its install point on the Earth-facing side of Node 2, also known as Harmony. And so there's about 4,800 pounds of stuff, if you will, packed into the SpaceX Dragon. And that's split up into 2 different sections. The pressurized part, which has crew supplies, a little over 1,000 pounds on board. It also has science investigations. Dragon delivering a lot of science primarily for its missions. That includes a number of biological research studies and technology demonstrations and others. that it will bring up, also ultimately returning science experiments at the end of its mission. Also has some spacewalk equipment, has actually a new spacesuit for spacewalking astronauts in its pressurized cargo hold. So in addition to that, another 363 pounds. About 416 pounds of spare vehicle hardware, spare parts for the International Space Station, and 11 pounds of computer resources. That's just basically computer hardware, spare cords, batteries, things of that nature. Then in Dragon's trunk, there's the unpressurized payloads, weighing in at about 1,400 pounds, and that's split across two different payloads that will ultimately get removed from Dragon's trunk robotically and attached to the outer part of the International Space Station. So with that all told, it's about 4,800 pounds of cargo with all of the packaging and everything added in, and delivering a nice bulk of supplies and science experiments, supporting dozens of the more than 250 experiments that are going to take place over the course of expeditions 54 and 55. So with those unpressurized payloads, again, there's two that are going to be in there. The first of which, the Space Debris Sensor, also known as the SDS, is actually an impact sensor that's designed to measure the orbital debris environment around the International Space Station. This is actually a photo of an orbital debris strike on one of the windows in the cupola module. The space station, one of the most heavily shielded spacecraft ever designed, capable of withstanding direct hits from debris in the low Earth orbit environment up to about a centimeter in diameter. For everything bigger than that, from 10 centimeters and beyond, we can actually track those and move the station out of the way. That leaves a gap of everything between those sizes, that 1 centimeter and the 10 centimeters, that can be a little more difficult to track. So this space debris sensor is going to be mounted outside of the International Space Station and uses a number of thin films and also an acoustic sensor system and a number of other sensors to record impacts over time, actually providing semi-real-time impact detection and recording. And then this will help characterize kind of that environment, how much debris is floating around the International Space Station. All of this feeding back into how we can better shield and protect spacecraft in the future, and also feeding into how we could potentially start cleaning up that environment in low Earth orbit. These dots obviously not to scale, but there are several 100,000 pieces of space debris, everything ranging from paint flecks from spent rocket stages to the spent rocket stages themselves. And so this obviously a problem for any spacecraft in low Earth orbit. So coming up with effective countermeasures, very important just for ensuring safe and successful operations in low Earth orbit. And again, that's only one of two. So the second payload that's going to be removed and attached to one of the external logistics carriers is the TSIS, the Total and Spectral Solar Irradiance Sensor. And that's actually going to be taking a look at the sun, measuring the total solar irradiance and the solar spectral irradiance. And this is actually going to track the Earth's total energy input from the sun and how and that's going to contribute to a better understanding of how our atmosphere responds to the different output changes from the sun itself. And so this could obviously help us better understand the effects on Earth's climate and how that energy from the sun is driving atmospheric and oceanic circulations on Earth, and actually knowing the magnitude and how much variance is built into solar irradiance, very essential to understanding the Earth's climate. This is actually going to be building on one of the longest climate data records derived from space-based observations, nearly 40 years of data, and they're going to just basically continue all the different observations they've been doing with this new device on board the International Space Station. So that, again, the second external piece that's being delivered inside of Dragon, just two in the external trunk right now, and those will get attached, obviously, after Dragon itself is berthed to the vehicle in the days to come. And at this point, the room did get the go, no go, and the poll going affirmative. And Dragon now departing that 250-meter hold point. So now it's going to continue to close in. Pretty soon, we'll actually be inside the capture window, but it's now going to continue pressing in until it gets to about 30 meters away from the International Space Station. It'll once again do a hold, and they'll do a checkout of all of the navigational and approach equipment just to make sure everything is functioning as it should be. And then once that's confirmed, they'll give it another go, and then it'll move into that final capture point. That again will be about 10 meters away from the station, at which point Mark Vande Hei, the prime for capture this morning, will be able to reach out with the Canadarm2 robotic arm and grapple the Dragon. And again, the team's working with these folks here out at Hawthorne in the SpaceX Flight Control Room. They've been monitoring and controlling Dragon since its launch back on Friday, flying the vehicle essentially from their flight control room out there in Hawthorne. They're working hand in hand right now with our team here in Houston as they slowly move Dragon into those final stages right before its capture. And the sun just now rising on Dragon and the International Space Station itself. The two vehicles currently flying just over the southern part of the Pacific Ocean.
Station Houston on 2. Dragon is inside the 200-meter keep-out sphere. Crew now has authority to issue an abort if no comm with Houston and light is outside of the corridor.
Station copies all.
And that was Capcom Leslie Ringo giving the call to the crew. Dragon inside of 200 meters, that keep out sphere, that imaginary sphere drawn around the International Space Station that just comes with an additional set of restrictions for visiting vehicles and what they can do when they're that close in that vicinity of the station. But continuing to close in now, its next hold point is going to be that 30-meter point. And again, per the timeline, capture originally targeted for right on the dot at around 5 a.m. Central Time, so a little over an hour and 15 minutes from now. But we'll continue to follow along with the team as Dragon continues to check off these milestones, continues to close in on the International Space Station. And a short handover there will reacquire video signal with the station momentarily. Now, though, everything proceeding smoothly, Dragon continuing to close in, the team out there in Hawthorne overseeing the systems on the vehicle during this approach. So still getting an up close and personal view of Dragon as it continues to close in right now about 173 meters away. So well inside that 200-meter keep-out sphere around the International Space Station. It's going to continue closing in until about 30 meters, and that's the next built-in hold point for the unmanned cargo craft. And we're still standing by here in Mission Control Houston. Again, everything going very smoothly. The team here having a very busy night as they already oversaw a launch of a Soyuz spacecraft with 3 new crew members who are currently on their way to the International Space Station to join the 3 crew members currently on board right now. 2 of them standing by, Mark Vande Hei and Joe Acaba, ready to capture this Dragon, which per the clock should be arriving in about an hour and change. And they'll be reaching out again with that Canadarm2 using the control station on board the station to reach out and grapple with the Dragon. Once they've completed that, they'll hand over the control of Canadarm2 to the teams down here on the ground to maneuver Dragon and actually install it to the International Space Station. But everything moving smoothly, a couple of minutes behind the timeline, but not tracking any issues with the vehicle. And as you can see, the sun definitely up. We are in a period of fairly high beta, as it's called. So actually a lot of sunlight right now for the station. In just a couple of days, it'll actually go through a period of not even seeing a sunset. So the station itself will actually be in full sunlight for an entire orbit around the planet. But for now, providing some pretty spectacular views. Dragon just about to cross the 150-meter point and continue closing in the next checkpoint, that 30-meter arrival, at which point it will pause. They'll do another series of checkouts, and then the team will do a go, no go for it to arrive further to that capture point. Dragon continuing to close in. Dragon and the International Space Station about to make a pass over South America. Meanwhile, still seeing clouds and the blue waters of the Pacific Ocean in the background. The uncrewed spacecraft packed with about 4,800 pounds of supplies, science experiments, and different payloads and vehicle hardware. Some of the other payloads on board include one from a commercial company, a number of commercial companies flying research to the International Space Station via the National Lab, which is managed by CASIS, the Center for the Advancement of Science in Space, opening up the resources on board the International Space Station for commercial companies, academia, and other government agencies to fly their own research in microgravity on board the space station. Just one such research project coming up from the company Made in Space, who already has facilities on board the International Space Station testing 3D printing in microgravity, is actually going to be looking at doing a little bit of manufacturing in microgravity. This one will be the optical fiber production in microgravity, actually looking at producing fiber optic cables in microgravity. They'll attempt to pull fiber optic wire from something known as Z-bland, which is a heavy metal fluoride glass, which is commonly used here on Earth to make fiber optic glass. Now, fiber optics used obviously in a lot of broadband applications, delivering high-speed internet. Research has indicated that this fiber being created in microgravity might not crystallize as much, so actually might give it a much better optical quality than what we're able to get down here on the ground. So that could lead to a much higher quality fiber optic cable being produced in space for use in space, but also more importantly back down here on the Earth, delivering faster speeds and other things of that nature. So very exciting test that's going to be carried out over the next several weeks on board the station. And that payload on Dragon just hopefully about an hour away from being captured. Seeing a bit of land now, station and Dragon just passing over the southern part of South America, flying over Argentina and Chile. Dragon itself about 107 meters in closing on the International Space Station, slowly making its way on a direct line towards a 30-meter hold point. Everything continuing to progress smoothly with the flight into station so far.
Houston station on 2, we're showing prior range 103.55, secondary 99.6, and decreasing. Monitor 1, we are showing the vehicle about the vehicle width port and half a vehicle length forward, and we're showing the outline is half a vehicle starboard with the circle as well. And on monitor 3, the vehicle is pretty well aligned with the outline, half a vehicle length forward, and both are starboard.
Copy all, and that's expected.
And again, that was Joe Acaba giving a few more performance calls. He's in the station's cupola module, backing up fellow NASA astronaut Mark Vande Hei, who's going to be primed for capturing Dragon this morning. Dragon just about to cross 90 meters in closing. Again, the next major milestone will be a hold at 30 meters, where it'll stand by for another series of checkouts on all the guidance and navigation equipment, and then get a go from the teams here in Houston to continue, at which point the teams out at Hawthorne, the SpaceX team, will be able to command the vehicle to begin moving in once more. Dragon just crossed the 80-meter point, continuing to slowly close in. Everything looking good so far with the alignment. Joe Acaba and Mark Vande Hei, the two NASA astronauts, standing by inside the station's cupola, monitoring Dragon on its final approach, and Mark Vande Hei is going to be primed for reaching out with the Canadarm2 robotic arm to capture the vehicle once it arrives at that final capture point. But again, we're about 77 meters and continuing to close. Once it arrives at 30, that'll be the next built-in hold and the next major milestone in this morning's activities. And so once the vehicle arrives at that capture point, as we'll see in this animation, it'll approach the International Space Station. It makes, again, these series of built-in holds once it's inside that keep out sphere, that 200-meter area around the International Space Station, ultimately flying to a distance of about 10 meters away, at which point the astronauts will use the Canadarm2 robotic arm to reach out and attach it to the Grapple fixture on the Dragon spacecraft. They'll then hand over control to the teams down here on the ground who will maneuver Dragon, ultimately berthing it to the Earth-facing port on Node 2, also known as Harmony. And then Dragon will remain there for the duration of its mission before being unberthed, and that plan to be done in January, and then ultimately released for the flight home. For now, though, just about to cross, and we just crossed 70 meters and continuing to close. Again, the capture was planned to take place around 5 a.m. Central Time, 6 a.m. Eastern, so we should be just about an hour away, dragging a couple of minutes down on the timeline so far, but not tracking any issues with the vehicle, everything proceeding smoothly to this capture. We'll continue to track with the teams here in Mission Control Houston, working with the folks out at Hawthorne on the SpaceX team, monitoring and commanding the Dragon on this final approach. "60 meters and closing." And this actually a view from a camera right at the end of the robotic arm that's going to be capturing Dragon. We'll see the target come right into view as this reaches out to grapple the vehicle under the command of Mark Vanda High, the NASA astronaut on board the station who's going to be primed for this capture activity. And Dragon just passed 50 meters away from the space station, so just about 20 to go. until we're at that next hold point, that 30-meter milestone. Once it arrives there, they'll stop. And then once again, poll the teams, make sure everything checks out well with the Dragon before giving it the go to depart and head towards the final capture point, which will be just about 10 meters away, and allow the crew members to reach out with the Canadarm2 arm and grapple with the Dragon vehicle. So continuing to move in, 47 meters in closing.
Houston, station on 2 for Dragon. In monitor 1, we're just showing the vehicle almost off the monitor. Just want to make sure you're happy with that view.
And Joe, if you can pan up, we'd much appreciate. And Joe, that's a good view. Thank you.
Dragon's just under 40 meters now, so just 10 meters to go till our next milestone in this morning's capture activity.
In Houston on 2, we can do the same on monitor 3 if you'd like.
And you're go for that as well?
And Dragon just passed 35, so less than 5 meters to go.
Station Houston on 2. Dragon is at the 30-meter hold. We are performing our assessments on the ground, and we'll let you know shortly when you are go to proceed with step 4 in 1.102. We also estimate your go for capture to be on time around 10:50.
Okay, we copy all with capture approximately 10:50. Thank you.
And with that, Capcom Leslie Ringo giving the crew a heads up. Dragon now holding at the 30-meter point. And so again, they're going to do some checkouts here. Basically just verify all the systems still functioning on Dragon before they give it that final go.
Confirm the 30-meter hold per step 4 in 1.102. Go to maneuver to high hover.
You copy, you go to maneuver for high hover.
And so we just heard the steps being undertaken again. You're hearing Joe Acaba on board the International Space Station. He's backing up Mark Vande Hei, who's going to be the prime for the actual capture, controlling the robotic arm from inside the station's cupola. Dragon right now just 30 meters away from the International Space Station. After it does all of these checkouts, they'll give it one more go, and it will continue on to the capture point. That'll be only about 10 meters away, and then we'll see the robotic arm slowly reach out, and we'll actually have a view right down the barrel of the robotic arm itself. It'll line up with one of the capture targets on Dragon and attach to that grapple fixture, which we can actually see right here already in view. And once captured, the crew members on board will hand over control, and then the robotics controllers here in Houston will take over, maneuver Dragon into its berthing point on the Earth-facing side of Node 2, the Harmony module, where it will be installed a little bit later this morning.
Copy, OFF.
Houston, we can verify the strobe is off.
And we copy.
And for now, Dragon still holding at that 30-meter point. The team's just discussing next steps here, and then pretty soon they'll go to do a go-no-go poll around the room here in Houston, And again, working in concert with the flight controllers out in Hawthorne from SpaceX, who are responsible for commanding Dragon during all of the phases of its flight. And once we get that go to depart, Dragon will begin closing in once more, leaving this 30-meter point going into a range of about 10 meters. And then the crew will get the go-ahead to reach out and grapple the vehicle with Canadarm2. So for now, just standing by for a few more minutes. Should hopefully get that go, no-go call very shortly and begin closing Dragon in a little bit closer. So still continuing to stand by at that 30-meter hold point. Meanwhile, in the background, you can see the Earth continuing to pass by. The station actually just about to cross over the Strait of Gibraltar, as it's right over Morocco right now, about to cross just to the south of Spain and then out over the Mediterranean Sea. Dragon still holding. We'll get that go, no-go poll here soon in Houston, and then get Dragon to go to begin closing in a little bit closer. You can see the robotic arm already there, ready and waiting. Mark Vande Hei, the NASA astronaut, is going to be at the controls, driving the arm in to capture Dragon. So still holding at 30 and should be moving along in the next few minutes. So going through a short handover real quick, we'll get video signal back with the International Space Station momentarily. For now, though, Dragon's still at that 30-meter hold point. Should get the go, no go calls here in the room any moment. And then the team over at Hawthorne will get the go ahead to begin pressing Dragon in a little bit closer. It'll eventually get to its capture point, which is about 10 meters away from the International Space Station, at which point it'll be game time for the astronauts on board. Mark Vande Hei and Joe Acaba, the two NASA crew members, standing by in the station's cupola. Mark Vande Hei is going to be prime for the operation, and we've been hearing status calls from Joe Acaba backing him up throughout this morning's activities. But the SpaceX flight controllers, again, out at Hawthorne, they've been controlling Dragon ever since its launch back on Friday, as it fine-tuned its path towards the International Space Station, and is now just 30 meters away. And once it gets captured, control will be handed over to teams again here in Mission Control Houston, where robotics controllers will maneuver the arm and Dragon to install it to the Earth-facing port on Node 2, the Harmony module, where it's going to reside until January. But for now, still standing by. Dragon still 30 meters away. We should be getting a call very shortly to begin checking off the final milestones and see Dragon get captured.
Houston Station, SSRMS is in a high hover position.
And we copy.
Houston, station on 2 for Dragon, step 3.3. The crew is ready for Dragon approach to capture point.
And Joey, copy. Dragon is ready to proceed to the capture point. Expect approach to resume shortly.
Station copies.
And with that call, it's time for Dragon to once again resume closing in on the space station. The teams Peltier and Mission Control Houston all go. The teams out at Hawthorne go. The crew on board go. So everything now lined up for Dragon to continue closing in. It's still hovering right at about 30 meters out and is now going to begin resuming its approach, arriving at the capture point, at which point it will stop once more, and it will be over to the crew members on board the space station to reach out with the robotic arm and capture Dragon.
Station Houston on 2. Dragon has begun approach from 30 meters. Monitor per step 5 and 1.102.
Step 5, 1.102. Houston station on 2 for corridor monitoring. We are showing the outline of the vehicle on both monitor 1 and monitor 3 is approximately half a vehicle length forward and a half a vehicle width starboard, and it looks like the light is within the circle.
And that's a good call, Joe.
Dragon continuing to inch its way towards the International Space Station, moving in at a very slow closure rate right now, only about 0.02 meters per second. It's still a little under 28 meters away. So again, it just departed that 30-meter staging point, and it's going to move now to the capture point. It takes about 14 minutes or so to move from that 30-meter point to its final capture point. So going to just continue to stand by and watch Dragon slowly make its way up. And once it gets to that final capture point, again, action will pick up and they'll hand over to the crew to reach out with the Canadarm2 and capture Dragon. So just continuing to stand by, watching Dragon as it flies in. The Earth passing by in the background. The station actually just about to cross the border between Russia and Kazakhstan, where just a few hours ago a crew launched. The 3 newest crew members making their way towards the International Space Station, set to arrive 2 days from now. So a very busy traffic period this week for the International Space Station to close out the year 2017. For now, everything continuing to go smoothly with Dragon moving into that capture point and then setting up for capture, the final activity for this stage. SpaceX's Dragon still closing in. It's about 23 meters in closing. The clocks on the wall have us likely looking at about 23 minutes away from a capture. So a short handover, we'll get video signal back soon. Dragon is under 20 meters away. Both teams continuing to monitor on the ground. The SpaceX team out at Hawthorne and the NASA team here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room in Houston. And the sun just setting on Dragon and the International Space Station. Dragon right now only 12.3 meters away, so just a little over 2 meters to go, and then we'll be at that capture point. We're expecting a go-no-go in about 6 minutes or so. Again, the capture was originally targeted to come at about 5 a.m. Central Time, 6 a.m. Eastern, which is about 15 minutes from now. So everything continuing to go extremely smoothly with the vehicle as it flies into that capture point. The two astronauts on board, Mark Vande Hei and Joe Acampa, standing by, monitoring the vehicle on its final approach. And Mark Vande Hei is going to be primed for actually reaching out with that robotic arm and grabbing the vehicle, packed with about 4,800 pounds of stuff for the International Space Station, science experiments, spare hardware, even experiments that are going to be pulled out of the trunk and attached to the outside of the International Space Station. So getting very close. It's very slow and very deliberate process as the vehicle flies in to this capture point, but pretty soon we'll be seeing the arm reaching out and grabbing SpaceX. So just a few more moments now. The vehicle really coming great into view here. This one of the HD cameras on the outboard of the International Space Station.
Station Houston on 2, confirm capture point hold per step 6 in 1.102.
We copy all. We see prior range 10.94, secondary 11.0. CCP LED config is as expected. Grapple fixture is stable within the capture volume. The dot is within the outer corridor, domestic corridors, no limit check violations this time. And we're looking at the lightings conditions, and we believe that they are good to go, and we can confirm them, and crew is ready for Dragon capture.
Stand by for capture.
And so with Dragon at the capture point, the crew ready to go. The flight director here in Houston, Vincent LaCourte, going to pull the team now. And once we get that verdict, they'll radio back up to the crew, and then it'll be time to capture Dragon.
Station Houston on 2, go for capture sequence. Perform step 4 in 1.110 Dragon capture. Begin monitoring the backaway cue card.
Okay, copy all. We are go for the capture sequence, and starting with step 4 of 1.110.
So with that, the team giving the go for capture. The crew now going to start working through their steps. We should see the robotic arm start to close in on Dragon momentarily.
In Houston Station on 2, we're just going to sweeten up the view.
Copy.
Right now, the crew going through all of their final checks. Very shortly, the robotic arm will start driving forward. Mark Vande Hei, the NASA astronaut, at the controls.
Houston Station on 2, we show monitor 2 is zoomed out completely, and we're going in for the capture.
We copy and concur.
And with that, the arm in motion, now approaching Dragon. The arm just 4 meters away. Dragon holding steady, the arm 3 meters and closing. Two meters and closing. There will be an initial contact, and we'll wait for confirmation that the snares have engaged to confirm capture. One meter. And there's that initial contact. And snares closed. So capture confirmed, 4:57 a.m. Central Time, 5:57 a.m. Eastern, while the station flew just between Australia and Papua New Guinea at an altitude of 252 statute miles. So again, SpaceX's Dragon on its 13th resupply mission to the International Space Station has been captured. contact coming in. The snare is closing at 4:57 a.m. Central Time, 5:57 a.m. Eastern.
In Houston, station on 2 for Dragon. We're still waiting for position hold.
Everyone copy?
Houston, station on 2 for robotics. Without position hold, we'll be waiting for your go before we safety arm.
Everyone copy?
And so with Dragon captured, we'll stand by for a minute until they safe the arm. Meanwhile, from this view, you can actually see some flashes of lightning in the earth below.
And Station Houston on 2, you have a go to safe the arm.
Okay, copy. We're going to go ahead and safety arm. In Houston, station on 2, with that, we're showing capture complete, and you have a go for post-capture reconfiguration.
Awesome job, Mark and Joe. It's a great day to see Dragon back at ISS again.
It's a beautiful spacecraft, and we're looking forward to digging into it and getting some science on board. Congratulations to the entire ground team for making this such a smooth vehicle. I personally very appreciate how steady it was.
Great words, and we appreciate it all.
All right, well, back here in Mission Control Houston, everybody very excited. Dragon has been captured. Again, that time was at 4:57 a.m. Central, 5:57 a.m. Eastern, while the station and Dragon were flying just between the northern part of Australia and Papua New Guinea. So a textbook capture for Dragon, almost on time. It was actually a little bit early, but everything went very well with the vehicle. Mark Van de Heij at the controls, backed up by Joe Acaba, successfully capturing the Dragon. With it now in the grasp of the Canadarm2 robotic arm, controls going to get passed down to the teams here on the ground, who are now going to maneuver Dragon using the arm, commanding it remotely to eventually get it ready for its installation to the Earth-facing side of the Harmony module, Node 2. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We'll be back on the air in about an hour and a half, where we expect Dragon to be just about ready to be installed, and we'll show you the final installation to where it'll get bolted in place, and then that'll set it up for the crew to begin unloading the cargo. Again, about 4,800 pounds of cargo on board this uncrewed spacecraft, making SpaceX's 13th resupply mission to the International Space Station. So a successful capture. Rejoining us in a little bit to see the installation, but everything going very well so far with SpaceX's mission. With that, we're going to go ahead and sign off. We'll be back soon, but for now, this is Mission Control Houston.